Hey, you alright out here? No need to go through this alone.
I didn't want this, but I won't let you feel unwanted.
She thought escaping her abusive home was impossible until one mistake changed everything. Pregnant, powerless, and hunted by the man who raised her, Deon had only one choice left. And what happened next would change her life forever. Thank you for coming to my channel today. Please like and comment and also subscribe. Deon learned very young that silence was the only way to survive. In a house where love was conditional and fear ruled everything, she learned to endure, not to dream. But one mistake, one unexpected pregnancy shattered the life she'd been forced to accept. Hunted by the man who controlled her, abandoned by the people who should have protected her, Deon ran, straight into a future she never imagined, because the man who found her didn't see a burden. He saw someone worth protecting. And what began as survival slowly became something far more dangerous: hope. This is the story of how a broken girl reclaimed her life and why her escape came at a cost no one expected. Deon learned early in life that silence was safer than protest. She learned it the year her parents divorced, when she was only 8 years old, standing in the narrow hallway of their apartment with her small backpack clutched to her chest. Her mother held her hand tightly, too tightly, as if afraid Deon might disappear. Her father stood on the other side, expression stiff, already distant, a man preparing to become a memory. Not long after, her mother remarried. That was when Deon's childhood truly ended. Her stepfather, Marcus Hale, was a man who smiled politely in public and ruled harshly in private. He owned a small logistics company and liked to call himself self-made, though his temper and control issues ruled the household more than any business sense ever did. At first, he tolerated Deon. Later, tolerance turned into indifference. Indifference hardened into cruelty. When Deon was 10, her mother gave birth to a son, Victor. From that day on, the house had a clear hierarchy. Victor was the treasure. Deon was the inconvenience. A house without warmth. Deon grew up quietly. She learned how to walk softly, speak less, and take up as little space as possible. Praise never came her way, but criticism did, sharp, frequent, and often undeserved. If Victor broke something, Deon was blamed for not watching him. If dinner was late, Deon was scolded for not helping enough. If Marcus was in a bad mood, Deon became the easiest target. Her mother, once gentle, slowly faded into a shadow of herself. Years of emotional pressure and exhaustion dulled her spirit. She rarely defended Deon anymore. When she did, it was weak and apologetic, followed by long silences and tearful nights behind a closed bedroom door. Deon learned not to hope. She cleaned the house after school. She cooked when her mother was tired. She took Victor to and from school when Marcus said it was her responsibility as the older sister. Any gratitude was non-existent. "You should be useful if you're going to live here," Marcus often said. Those words carved themselves deep into her heart. Dreams she wasn't allowed to have. Despite everything, Deon was intelligent, frighteningly so. Books became her refuge. She studied late at night with a flashlight under the blanket, memorizing formulas, stories, and words that allowed her to escape. Her teachers noticed. By the time she reached high school, Deon ranked near the top of her class. Scholarships were mentioned. University brochures arrived in the mail. Marcus hated them. "College is expensive nonsense," he scoffed one evening, tossing a brochure onto the table. "You should learn something practical or get a job." Her mother hesitated. "But she's talented." Maybe Marcus slammed his hand down. "We don't have money to waste." Deon stayed quiet, but that night she cried silently into her pillow. She didn't want luxury. She just wanted a way out. She applied for scholarships in secret. wrote essays at school, met counselors after class, and somehow, miraculously, she earned partial financial aid to a local university. When the acceptance letter arrived, she stared at it for a long time, heart trembling between joy and fear. She showed it to her family anyway. Marcus's face darkened. "You think you can just leave?" he asked coldly. "Who's going to help around here?" Her mother tried to speak, but her voice failed her again. Victor laughed. "She won't last a semester." That night, Marcus made his decision. The money that wasn't hers. Deon had no idea that her late grandmother had left a modest education fund in her name. Money meant specifically for her tuition. Her mother had once told Marcus about it, trusting him to manage it responsibly. That trust was a mistake. Without telling Deon, Marcus drained the account to cover business losses and personal expenses. When the tuition deadline arrived, Deon discovered the truth in the harshest way possible. The financial office called. "There's no remaining balance in your education account," the clerk said gently. "You'll need to arrange payment." Deon's hands shook as she hung up. That night, she confronted her stepfather. "You used my tuition money?" she asked quietly. Marcus didn't even pretend to deny it. "I did what I had to do. That money was for my education." "You live under my roof," he snapped. "Everything you have is because of me." Her mother cried. Victor smirked. Deon realized then that no one was going to save her, so she saved herself. Working to survive, she took a part-time job at a cafe near campus, then another on weekends at a small convenience store. Sleep became optional. Exhaustion became routine. She attended lectures with dark circles under her eyes, drank too much cheap coffee, and studied between shifts. Some nights she returned home so late she didn't bother speaking to anyone. Marcus complained anyway. "You're never around. Useless." Victor mocked her uniform. Her mother whispered apologies but offered nothing more. Still, Deon endured. She had a goal: graduate, leave, never look back. The night everything changed. The turning point came unexpectedly. One rainy evening, Deon left work later than usual. Her bus broke down halfway, forcing her to walk several blocks in the rain. Her phone battery died. Her shoes soaked through. When she finally reached a quiet street near a luxury hotel, exhaustion overtook her. She sat on a bench under the awning, trying to catch her breath. That's when she noticed him. A tall man stood nearby, speaking into his phone with a calm, commanding voice. His coat was expensive, his posture relaxed but powerful. Even from a distance, he radiated authority. He ended the call and noticed her sitting there, drenched and trembling. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was deep, controlled, not unkind. Deon hesitated. Years of caution screamed at her to say no, but her body betrayed her. She nodded weakly. "My phone died," she admitted, "and the buses stopped running." He glanced at the rain, then at her thin jacket. After a pause, he said, "I can call you a car." She should have refused, but she was tired. So very tired. A kindness she wasn't used to. He introduced himself as Adrian Cross. The car arrived quickly, far too luxurious for someone like her. She hesitated again, but the rain left her little choice. Inside the warm vehicle, she relaxed despite herself. Adrian didn't pry. He asked simple questions. Her name, whether she was a student, if she lived far. She answered cautiously. When they reached her neighborhood, his brow furrowed slightly, but he said nothing. As she opened the door, he spoke again. "Deon," he said, testing her name gently. "You shouldn't be walking alone so late. Be careful." She nodded. "Thank you. For helping." He gave a small smile. "You're welcome." She didn't expect to ever see him again. But fate had other plans. Crossing paths again. 2 weeks later, Deon was working a double shift at the cafe when the door opened and a familiar figure walked in. She froze. Adrian. This time dressed casually, without the aura of urgency. His eyes met hers almost instantly, recognition lighting up his expression. "Deon," he said, surprised. "You work here?" She nodded, suddenly self-conscious in her apron. "I didn't know," he said. "I'll have a coffee." From that day on, he began coming regularly, sometimes alone, sometimes with a laptop, always polite, always respectful. He never crossed boundaries, never asked personal questions she didn't offer. Slowly, conversation grew easier. He learned she was studying business. She learned he ran an investment firm. He admired her discipline. She admired his calm strength. And without realizing it, Deon began to feel something dangerous. Comfort. The beginning of change. Adrian never looked at her with pity. He listened when she spoke. He remembered small details. When she mentioned liking cinnamon, he ordered her a pastry one morning without saying a word. It was such a small thing. But Deon went home that night and cried, because no one had ever done something so thoughtful for her before. Still, she kept her distance. She knew her place in the world, or at least what it had always been. Someone like him didn't belong in her life, yet fate continued to weave their paths together. One evening, after closing, she slipped on the wet floor behind the cafe and twisted her ankle badly. The manager was irritated more than concerned. "You can't work like that," he said. "Go home." Deon tried to walk, failed, and then Adrian was there again, having stayed late. Without hesitation, he helped her up. "I'll take you to the hospital," he said firmly. "I can manage." "No," he interrupted gently. "You don't have to." Those words struck deeper than he knew. A line quietly crossed. At the hospital, he stayed until her ankle was wrapped, paid the bill when she protested weakly, drove her home again. It was late. The house lights were off. Her stepfather would be asleep or drunk. She hesitated before opening the door. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He looked at her carefully. "You don't owe me anything, Deon." Their eyes lingered. The moment stretched fragile, charged, dangerous. She stepped back first. "Good night." He nodded. "Good night." Neither of them realized that night was the last moment before everything changed. Foreshadowing weeks later, exhaustion caught up to her. She began feeling nauseous in the mornings. Her periods became irregular. She blamed stress, work, lack of sleep. Until one day, in the cramped bathroom of the cafe, she stared at 2 red lines on a cheap test. Her hands trembled violently. No, no, no. Her mind raced backward to one night she hadn't allowed herself to think about. A night of vulnerability, of comfort turning into closeness, of crossing a line neither had planned to cross. Her knees gave out. Deon slid down the wall, clutching the test to her chest as panic and disbelief crashed over her. She was pregnant, and her life, already fragile, was about to shatter. Deon didn't go back out to the cafe floor for 10 minutes. She sat on the closed toilet lid in the employee bathroom with her elbows on her knees, staring at the pregnancy test as if her glare could erase the second line. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The walls smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old steam. 2 lines. Not a shadow, not a smudge, not the maybe she was praying for. A full, undeniable yes. Her throat tightened so hard she could barely swallow. She pressed her palm to her stomach as if she could feel something there, as if the proof would take shape beneath her skin instantly. But all she felt was her own racing heartbeat. It didn't make sense. She was careful. She had to be. She'd spent her entire life being careful. Careful with her words, careful with her movements, careful with hope. And yet, there it was, the one mistake she could not afford. Deon forced herself to stand, splashed cold water on her face, and looked into the mirror. Her reflection looked the same. Tired eyes, damp hair pinned back, the faintest shadows under her cheekbones. Nothing about her face said pregnant. Nothing about her face said my life is about to burn down. She tucked the test into her bag like contraband, took one deep breath that didn't fill her lungs, and walked back out. A day that wouldn't end. The next few hours crawled. She moved on autopilot, wiping tables, taking orders, handing over cups. Her co-workers joked about weekend plans and complained about customers. Deon nodded in the right places but heard none of it. Every time she turned too quickly, nausea rose like a wave. Every time she paused, her mind sprinted. What do I do? How far along could I be? How did this happen? And worse, who do I tell? The answer to the last question made her stomach twist harder than the nausea, because telling anyone meant consequences. For someone like her, consequences were never small. When her shift finally ended, her manager waved her off without looking up from his phone. "See you tomorrow, Deon. Don't be late." She gripped her bag strap until her knuckles whitened and stepped outside into the evening air. Cold wind slapped her cheeks, grounding her slightly. She began walking toward the bus stop, but halfway there she stopped. Her feet turned without permission, not toward home, toward the pharmacy. Confirmation hurts more. Inside, she bought 2 more tests, different brands, different packaging, as if variety could change reality. The cashier didn't look at her, just rang them up with bored efficiency. Deon waited until she reached the public bathroom near the back of the store. She locked herself inside, hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped the packaging. 5 minutes later, she sat on the toilet lid again. 2 lines, again, and again. Deon's chest caved. She pressed her forehead to the cool stall door and tried not to make a sound. Her eyes burned, but tears didn't fall yet. Her body felt too tense, too stunned. This wasn't an abstract fear anymore. It was a fact. She was pregnant. Home was a trap. The bus ride home was a blur of jerking stops and dim street lights. When she stepped off near her neighborhood, the familiar dread returned, the automatic tightening in her shoulders, the feeling of walking toward a place where she didn't belong. She reached the front door and paused. The house was dark except for the living room light. That meant Marcus was awake. Deon quietly opened the door and slipped inside. She made it 2 steps before Marcus's voice cut through the silence. "Where have you been?" Deon froze. Marcus was sitting on the couch, one arm slung over the back, a glass of something amber in his hand. The TV was on, volume low. His gaze was sharp, already annoyed. "I had work," she said carefully. "You always have work," he snapped, "but you still live here." Deon kept her face blank. She knew better than to show irritation. If she did, he'd pounce. Victor's laugh came from the hallway. He wandered in wearing headphones around his neck, chewing something loudly. Maybe she was out with her secret boyfriend, Victor teased, eyes glittering with the kind of cruelty that came from boredom. Deon's stomach lurched. She moved toward the kitchen. Marcus's voice followed her like a leash. "Your mother's not feeling well. You make dinner." Deon turned her head slightly. "Where is she?" "In bed," Marcus said. "Don't bother her. She's useless when she's like this." Deon's hands tightened around her bag strap. Useless. That word again. She swallowed and went into the kitchen, her mother's fading light. Later, after she cooked rice and fried eggs, the cheapest meal she could make quickly, she carried a small bowl up the stairs. The upstairs hallway smelled faintly of medicine and old blankets. She knocked softly on her mother's door. No answer. She opened it a crack. Her mother lay curled on the bed, face turned toward the wall. Her hair was messy, her shoulders thin under the blanket. The lamp beside her was off. "Mom?" Deon whispered. Her mother stirred. Deon? Deon stepped inside and set the bowl on the nightstand. I made you food. Her mother's eyes opened halfway. They were tired. Always tired. Thank you. Deon sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. She wanted to tell her. She wanted to pour it all out, the fear, the test, the fact that her life was about to collapse. But she couldn't, because her mother was barely holding herself together. And Marcus had long ago trained them both to understand that anything Deon confessed would become ammunition. So she just asked softly, Are you okay? Her mother's mouth trembled a little. I'm just tired. Everything hurts. Deon's chest squeezed. She leaned forward and brushed her mother's hair back gently, like she used to when she was little and her mother still sang to her. You should see a doctor, Deon said. Her mother gave a weak laugh. With what money? Deon had no answer. She stood up. Eat a little, okay? Her mother nodded faintly, then closed her eyes again. Deon left the room with the bowl untouched on the nightstand, and she felt something inside her crack. Because even if she somehow survived her own crisis, her mother was drowning slowly, and nobody else even noticed. The one person who made her feel safe. That night, Deon lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. Her stomach rolled every time she shifted. The pregnancy tests were hidden under a loose floorboard she'd discovered years ago. Her secret spot, where she'd hidden scholarship letters and small savings and anything Marcus might steal. She tried to sleep. Her mind wouldn't stop. And every time it circled the same memory, her face burned. Adrian. The night she'd told herself didn't matter. The night she'd been hurt, lonely, so exhausted she couldn't think straight. She'd gone to his place, not planned, not logical. Just one step after another until she ended up in a world that felt nothing like her own. She remembered the quiet warmth of his apartment, the soft lighting, the way he looked at her like she was real, like she was worth listening to. She remembered him asking, Are you sure? And she'd said yes because in that moment she wanted to feel wanted. She wanted to feel safe. Now, safety was the very thing she'd lost. Deon covered her face with her hands and finally, silently cried. Morning sickness and lies. Over the next week, Deon learned how hard it was to hide a pregnancy when your life was already stretched thin. She threw up twice in the cafe bathroom. Her coworker asked if she was sick. Deon smiled and lied. She missed a morning lecture because dizziness hit her so hard she nearly collapsed on the sidewalk. She told her professor she had a stomach bug. She ate crackers between shifts and prayed it would keep the nausea down. But the worst part wasn't physical. It was the constant fear that Marcus would find out. Because Marcus didn't react to weakness with concern. He reacted with rage and a pregnancy. To him, it would be proof she was dirty, proof she was worthless, proof she'd embarrassed the household, proof she should be punished. Deon could already hear his voice. Who did this? You think you're grown. You want to ruin my name. The fear lived in her bones. A doctor visit she couldn't afford. Deon finally forced herself to go to a low-cost clinic. She skipped lunch, skipped dinner, used the small cash she'd been hoarding from tips. The waiting room was packed. Women sat with tired faces. A couple argued quietly in the corner. A TV on the wall played muted daytime news. When Deon's name was called, her body felt numb. A nurse took her vitals, asked basic questions. Last period? Any pain? Any history of illness? Deon answered in short bursts, voice tight. Then the doctor came in, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and efficient hands. After the exam, she sat down with a clipboard. You're pregnant, she said gently. About 6 weeks, based on what you told me. Deon's hands clenched in her lap. 6 weeks. It was real. The doctor continued. Do you feel safe at home? The question was casual, but it hit Deon like a punch. Her mouth went dry. She forced a nod too quickly. Yes. The doctor studied her for a moment, then wrote something down. Okay, I'm going to give you prenatal vitamins and some information. There are options and resources depending on what you want to do. Deon couldn't speak. Options. Resources. What she needed was a life that didn't belong to Marcus Hale. What she needed was someone to tell her she wouldn't be destroyed for this. When she left the clinic, she stood outside on the sidewalk, holding a small paper bag with vitamins and pamphlets. The sun was too bright. She felt like the world was mocking her for continuing to spin normally, the call she didn't want to make by the time she reached the bus stop. Her decision had formed not because she wanted it, but because she had no other path. Adrian had to know. Not because he owed her rescue, but because this child, if she kept it, if it existed in her future at all, belonged to him too. Her fingers shook as she pulled out her phone. She still had his number. He'd given it to her, in case you ever need anything. Deon had stared at that message for days after he sent it, afraid to use it. Now she was terrified not to. She stared at the contact name, Adrian Cross. Then she hit call. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, his voice answered, calm as always. Deon? The sound of him saying her name nearly broke her. Her voice came out small. Adrian, I need to talk to you. Silence, then immediate attention in his tone. Are you okay? Deon swallowed hard. Her eyes stung. No, she whispered. I'm not. Another pause. Where are you? At the bus stop near... She gave the street name, then added, I don't know what to do. His voice dropped, steady and firm. Stay there. I'm coming. Her heart lurched. No, you don't have to. I'm coming, he repeated, leaving no room for argument. Don't hang up. Just breathe. Deon squeezed her eyes shut, and for the first time since the tests, she felt a thin thread of relief. Because someone was coming. Not to judge, not to punish, just to come. When he arrived, Adrian's car pulled up in less than 15 minutes, impossibly fast for the distance he likely had to travel. The window rolled down. Deon, he said. She stepped toward the car slowly, clutching her bag against her chest like armor. When she got inside, the warmth hit her first, then the faint scent of cologne and clean leather. Adrian looked at her. Really looked. His eyes narrowed slightly as he took in her pale face, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands wouldn't stop moving. Talk to me, he said quietly. Deon tried, but her voice cracked. She swallowed. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like smoke. Adrian didn't react immediately. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, but his face remained controlled. He blinked once. Then he said very softly, Are you sure? Deon nodded. I took tests. I went to a clinic. His jaw flexed, not anger, something else. Shock, concern, a deep, quiet intensity. How far along? He asked. 6 weeks. Adrian leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. His gaze dropped to her hands, then returned to her face. Okay, he said. Just one word. But it wasn't rejection. It wasn't accusation. It was stability. Deon's eyes filled. I don't know what to do, she admitted, voice trembling. I can't let my family find out. I can't. Adrian's expression hardened at the word family. What would happen if they did? He asked. Deon hesitated. Then, for the first time, she let a piece of truth escape. My stepfather. He's not kind, she whispered. He'll destroy me. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, low and certain, He won't. Deon looked at him, startled. Adrian's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. Deon, he said, you're not doing this alone. Her chest tightened painfully. She wanted to believe him so badly it terrified her. The car was quiet after Adrian spoke. Not an awkward silence, a heavy one. The kind that carried meaning, decisions, weight. Deon stared at her hands in her lap, twisting her fingers together. Her heart was still racing, but now there was something else tangled in the fear. Confusion. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "You can't just stop him. People like my stepfather don't stop." Adrian didn't answer right away. He pulled the car back into traffic, driving slowly, deliberately, as if giving her space to breathe. "Tell me about him," he said at last. Deon hesitated. She wasn't used to being asked that, not genuinely. Usually people assumed, or dismissed it. "He controls everything," she said. "Money, food, what time I come home, what I'm allowed to do. He says it's because I live under his roof." Her voice grew smaller. "When my mom got sick, it got worse. He says she's useless now. He says I owe him." Adrian's jaw tightened. "And Victor?" he asked carefully. Deon let out a bitter breath. "He learned from him. He treats me like I'm nothing, like I exist to serve." The car stopped at a red light. Adrian's hands clenched on the steering wheel. "That's abuse," he said quietly. Deon flinched. The word felt too big, too dangerous. "I manage," she said quickly. "I've always managed." He looked at her then, really looked. Her hunched shoulders, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she kept bracing herself like impact was inevitable. "No," he said. "You survive." "That's not the same thing." Her throat tightened. "An offer." She wasn't ready for. They drove for several more minutes before Adrian spoke again. "You can stay with me." The words landed softly but with force. Deon turned to him sharply. "What?" "You heard me," he said evenly. "You shouldn't go back there, not like this, not pregnant. Can't just—" She shook her head, panic flaring. "That would cause problems. He'd come looking for me." He won't," Adrian interrupted, voice low but firm. She stared at him. "You don't know him." "I know people like him," Adrian said, "and I know how to deal with them." That scared her almost as much as it comforted her. "You don't owe me anything," he added, sensing her hesitation. "This isn't a transaction. You need a safe place." "I have one." Deon hugged herself. "People don't just do that." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Some do." Her mind screamed danger, dependency. Don't trust this. But another part of her, the exhausted, frightened part, whispered something else. "What if this is the only chance you'll ever get?" She thought of her mother's hollow eyes, of Marcus's voice, of hiding pregnancy tests under floorboards, of raising a child in that house. Her stomach turned. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. Adrian's voice softened. "You're not." Silence stretched again. Finally, barely audible, she asked, "Just for a little while?" "As long as you need," he replied without hesitation. "Crossing a line. You can't uncross." Adrian didn't take her to a hotel. He took her to his home. The building stood quiet and modern, guarded, discreet. The kind of place Deon had only seen in passing, never imagined entering. The elevator rose smoothly, silently. Her heart pounded harder with every floor. When the doors opened, she stepped into a spacious, softly lit apartment. Everything looked calm, neutral colors, clean lines, warm lighting. It smelled faintly of coffee and something woody. She stopped just inside the doorway, suddenly unsure. "This is too much," she whispered. "I can't." "You can," Adrian said gently, "and you will be safe here." He showed her to a guest room, not small, not extravagant, just peaceful. Fresh sheets, a bedside lamp, a folded blanket at the foot of the bed. "There's a bathroom through there," he said. If you're hungry, I can order something, or make soup. She nodded numbly. When he turned to leave, she spoke without thinking. Why are you doing this? He paused in the doorway. Because you shouldn't have to face this alone, he said quietly. And because I care about you. Her breath hitched. He didn't say anything more. He closed the door softly behind him. Deon stood in the middle of the room, heart pounding. She sat on the edge of the bed, then slowly lay down. For the first time in years, she slept without listening for footsteps. Morning, without fear. Sunlight woke her, real sunlight, warm and gentle, not filtered through dusty curtains. For a moment, Deon didn't know where she was. Then memory rushed in. She sat up quickly, panic flaring until she realized something was missing. The dread, the knot in her stomach that usually greeted her every morning. It wasn't there. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathing slowly. A soft knock came at the door. Yes? She called. Adrian opened it slightly. Good morning, I made breakfast, only if you feel up to it. She hesitated, then nodded. At the table he set down toast, fruit, and tea. Simple, thoughtful. You don't have to eat everything, he said. Just a little. She took a bite, surprised when her stomach didn't rebel. They ate in silence for a moment. Then Adrian spoke carefully. I called in for you at the cafe. Her head snapped up. You what? I said you were sick, he clarified. You are. They don't need details. I could get fired. You won't, he said calmly. If they try, I'll help you find something better. Her chest tightened. You can't just fix my life. I'm not trying to control it, he replied. I'm trying to stabilize it. She looked down. That sounds like control. He didn't deny it immediately. Maybe, he admitted, but there's a difference between control and protection. The word protection sent a strange shiver through her. She didn't argue. When the past comes, knocking. 3 days later, her phone buzzed non-stop. Missed calls, voicemails, Marcus, Victor, her mother. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. Adrian noticed immediately. What's wrong? They know I'm not home, she whispered. Did you tell them where you were? No. He took the phone gently from her hand and looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. Do you want to listen to the messages? He asked. She shook her head quickly. No. Please. Okay. He silenced the phone. They'll come looking, she said, voice breaking. They always do. Let them, Adrian replied. She stared at him in disbelief. You don't understand? He met her gaze steadily. I understand power, and I understand boundaries. They don't get to cross yours anymore. Her heart pounded. You're talking like this is a war. His voice lowered. For people like him, it always is. The first confrontation. It happened sooner than she expected. That evening, the building's front desk called up. Mr. Cross, there's a man downstairs asking for Deon. Says he's family. Deon's blood turned to ice. Adrian didn't look at her when he answered. Send him away, sir. He's causing a scene. Adrian exhaled slowly, then stood. Stay here, he told Deon. Her eyes widened. No, please don't. I won't do anything reckless, he said calmly. I promise. She watched him walk out, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Minutes crawled by. She paced. Her hands shook. Memories flooded in shouting. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. He's gone. You're safe. She sank onto the couch, breath leaving her in a rush. When Adrian returned, his expression was controlled but cold. He won't be coming back, he said. She swallowed. What did you say to him? Enough. A dangerous kind of safety. That night, Deon couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring into nothing. Adrian came out quietly and sat across from her. You're thinking too loudly, he said gently. I'm scared. she admitted. Not of him. Of this. He tilted his head. Of what? Of how easy it feels to be here, she whispered. Of how much I'm starting to rely on you. His expression softened. Deon, he said carefully, you've never been allowed to rely on anyone. Of course it feels strange. She hugged the blanket tighter. What if I can't do this on my own anymore? He leaned forward slightly. Then don't, he said. Not right now. Silence stretched between them. Then, quietly, he added, You're carrying my child. That changes things. I won't pretend otherwise. Her breath caught. I'm not saying this to trap you, he continued. You still get choices. Always. But I'm not walking away. Tears slid down her cheeks. No one's ever said that to me before. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand rested gently over hers, warm, steady. You're not alone anymore, he said. And for the first time in her life, Deon almost believed it. The apartment grew quieter after that night. Not empty, not cold, just still. A different kind of quiet than the one Deon had known growing up. This one didn't feel like waiting for something bad to happen. Still, she woke every morning tense, half expecting to hear Marcus shouting her name. But instead she heard soft sounds, a kettle boiling, footsteps moving calmly, the low murmur of Adrian on the phone in another room. Ordinary sounds. Safe sounds. And slowly her body began to believe it. The shape of safety. Deon settled into a careful routine. She woke early out of habit, even though she didn't need to. She helped tidy the kitchen until Adrian gently told her she didn't have to. She spent hours reading, scrolling through school emails, or staring out the window thinking about what came next. The pregnancy symptoms grew more noticeable: nausea in the mornings, exhaustion that clung to her bones, sudden sensitivity to smells. Adrian noticed everything. You didn't finish your tea, he said one morning. She grimaced. It tastes strange today. He nodded thoughtfully and disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned with warm water and lemon. Try this. She blinked. How did you know? I looked it up, he admitted calmly. Her chest tightened in a way that felt both comforting and dangerous. The doctor visit. Together. A few days later, Adrian insisted on taking her to a proper prenatal appointment. You shouldn't be navigating this alone, he said. She hesitated at first. Sitting in a clinic next to him made everything feel real. Too real. But she agreed. At the clinic, the nurse glanced between them. Partner? Deon froze. Before she could speak, Adrian said evenly, Yes. The word echoed in her chest. The appointment was gentle but grounding. The doctor confirmed the pregnancy again, explained timelines, nutrition, warning signs. Nothing alarming. Everything normal. When they heard the faint heartbeat for the first time, Deon's breath caught. It was soft, fast, unreal. Her eyes filled before she could stop herself. Adrian didn't say anything. He simply shifted closer, his presence steady beside her. Later, outside the clinic, she finally whispered, I didn't think it would feel like that. He nodded. It changes things. She looked at him. Does it scare you? He considered the question honestly. Yes, he said, but not in the way you think. The power imbalance she can feel. Back at the apartment, reality crept in again. Adrian paid for everything. The food, the medical visits, the clothes he insisted she buy when her old ones began to feel uncomfortable. He never asked for repayment, never hinted at obligation. And yet, Deon felt it, the imbalance. She caught herself asking permission before doing small things, going for a walk, ordering food, even turning on the TV. Not because he demanded it, but because she had been trained her entire life to survive by anticipating reactions. One evening, Adrian noticed, You don't need to ask, he said gently when she paused in the doorway. This is your home, too. She swallowed. I don't know how to act when things don't come with conditions. His expression softened, something painful, flickering beneath his composure. That's not your fault, he said quietly. She wanted to believe him. The past refuses to stay quiet. Marcus didn't stop trying. The messages turned nastier. You think you can hide? You owe me. Come home now. Then one message that made her hands shake. You embarrassed me. You will fix this. Deon showed Adrian with trembling fingers. His jaw tightened, anger flashing through his controlled exterior. This ends now, he said. She panicked. Please don't do anything drastic. He met her eyes. I won't hurt him, but I will make sure he can't touch you again. That same evening, Adrian made several phone calls behind closed doors. He didn't tell her what he said or to whom, but the next morning the messages stopped. Completely. No calls, no texts, no threats. It was like Marcus had vanished. Deon felt relief and unease. What did you do? She asked quietly. Adrian looked at her for a long moment before answering. I use the systems I have access to, he said carefully. Legal ones. She searched his face. You're very powerful, aren't you? He didn't deny it. Yes. The word echoed heavy between them. Blurred lines. As the weeks passed, the emotional distance between them thinned. They cooked together, watched movies on opposite ends of the couch that slowly became closer. Sometimes she fell asleep there without meaning to, waking with a blanket carefully tucked around her. One evening she woke to find him still there, reading. You didn't go to bed, she murmured. I didn't want to wake you. Her heart squeezed. Moments like this made it harder to tell where gratitude ended and something deeper began. She started noticing small things, the way he always positioned himself slightly between her and strangers in public, how his voice softened when he said her name, how his eyes darkened with concern when she looked tired. It was comforting and frightening, because comfort could turn into dependence, and dependence could become a cage. Deon pushes back. One afternoon, after a long silence, Deon spoke up. I need to do something on my own. Adrian looked up from his laptop. What kind of thing? I want to go back to school, she said, or at least plan for it. I don't want to just exist here. He studied her carefully. I don't want you to feel trapped, he said. If you want to study, we'll make it happen. Her brows knit. You keep saying we. He paused. That's not what you want? She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. I don't know. I just don't want to disappear into someone else's life again. His expression softened with understanding and something like regret. You won't, he said quietly. I promise. After a moment, he added, Tell me what you want, not what you think you're allowed to want. The question stunned her. No one had ever asked her that. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Tears welled unexpectedly. I don't know yet, she whispered. That's okay, he said. We'll figure it out together. A crack in the calm. That night, Deon dreamed of her old house, the narrow hallway, the shouting, the feeling of being trapped. She woke, gasping, heart racing. Before she could stop herself, she padded into the living room. Adrian was there again, half asleep on the couch. Deon, he murmured, immediately alert. I had a nightmare, she admitted, embarrassed. He sat up fully. Come here. She hesitated only a second before sitting beside him. He didn't pull her close, he simply stayed near, solid and grounding. Her breathing slowly evened out. I hate that I need this, she whispered. You don't need to hate it, he replied quietly. Needing support doesn't make you weak. She looked at him, then really looked, at the lines of responsibility etched into his face, at the restraint in his posture, at the care he tried so hard to keep controlled. You're always holding yourself back, she said softly. His gaze sharpened. Because I have to. Why? Because you're vulnerable, he said honestly. And I won't be another person who takes from you. The words hit her hard. Emotions swelled, heavy and warm and frightening. She leaned forward before she could stop herself, just enough that her shoulder brushed his. He stilled. Neither moved. The air thickened, charged with something unspoken. Her heart pounded painfully loud. Slowly, carefully, he shifted just enough to give her space again. We should slow down, he said quietly. For your sake. She nodded, even though part of her ached at the distance. The beginning of change. Days later, a letter arrived, not from Marcus, from a law office. Adrian read it first, his expression darkening. What is it? She asked. They're attempting to claim you're financially dependent on your stepfather, he said, and that he has a right to be informed about your location. Her blood ran cold. He can't. He won't, Adrian said firmly. But this means he's escalating. Fear crept back into her chest. Adrian looked at her seriously. Deon, things are going to get more complicated before they get easier. She swallowed. Are you saying I should leave? No, he said immediately. I'm saying you need to be prepared, and you need to trust me. She searched his face. Trust. The word both terrified and tempted her. After a long moment, she nodded. Okay. Something shifted in his expression, resolve hardening into something fierce. Then I'll protect you, he said quietly. And our child. Her breath caught. He said our without hesitation. And for the first time since everything began, Deon felt a strange, fragile thing bloom in her chest. I hope the letter changed everything. It sat on the kitchen table between them, its official seal already broken, the legal language cold and invasive. Deon read it twice before the meaning fully settled in. Marcus was claiming dependency, claiming guardianship rights, claiming authority. Her hands began to shake. He can't do this, she whispered. I'm an adult. Yes, Adrian said firmly. And that's exactly why this won't work. But his jaw was tight, his shoulders tense not with fear, but with anger carefully contained. Deon noticed, and something in her chest twisted. When protection starts to feel heavy. Over the next few days, things accelerated. Adrian made more calls, spoke in clipped, controlled tones behind closed doors. Documents appeared, appointments were scheduled, lawyers contacted. Everything was efficient, effective, and overwhelming. Deon began to feel like a passenger in her own life. One afternoon, she overheard part of a conversation through the study door. She's vulnerable, Adrian said quietly but sharply. Yes, I understand the optics. No, I won't let him near her. Do what you have to. The call ended. Silence followed. Deon stood frozen in the hallway, heart pounding. She wasn't afraid of Marcus in that moment. She was afraid of losing herself again, this time to safety instead of cruelty. That night she barely touched her food. Adrian noticed. You've been quiet, he said. She hesitated, then spoke before she lost her nerve. You're doing everything for me, she said. And I'm grateful. I really am. But I feel like I'm disappearing again. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? I went from being controlled by fear to being protected by power, she said softly. And I don't know where I fit in that. The words landed harder than she expected. Adrian leaned back, stunned. That's not what I want, he said slowly. I know, she replied. But intention doesn't always stop the effect. Silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. You're right, he said quietly. I've been moving too fast. She looked at him, surprised. I'm used to solving problems by taking control, he admitted. That's how I survive. But this isn't a hostile takeover. This is your life. Her throat tightened. "I don't want to replace one cage with another," she whispered. He met her gaze steadily. "Then we won't." Drawing new lines. The next morning, things changed deliberately. Adrian invited her to sit with him at the table. "Let's reset," he said. "Together." He slid a notebook toward her. "You decide what you want. I'll support it, not override it." She stared at the blank page, unsure. After a long moment, she began to speak. "I want to finish school." He nodded. "Okay, I want therapy. Real therapy. Done. I want legal protection from my stepfather, restraining order, documentation, not intimidation." "Agreed. And I want space to make mistakes without feeling like I owe you." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded once. "That's fair." She hesitated, then added softly, "And I want us to slow down, emotionally." That one was harder, but he didn't argue. "Okay," he said. "We go at your pace." Relief rushed through her so suddenly she had to blink back tears. For the first time, the power shifted not away from her, but toward her, facing the past the right way. With a legal aid clinic's help, one Adrian paid for, but did not control, Deon filed documentation of emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and coercion. It was exhausting. She cried in the bathroom after interviews, shook while recounting memories she'd spent years burying. But each step gave her something new: language, validation, proof she hadn't imagined it. A temporary protective order was issued. Marcus was legally barred from contacting her. When the confirmation came through, Deon sat on the couch staring at her phone, stunned. "It's real," she whispered. Adrian watched her carefully. "How do you feel?" She searched herself. "Lighter," she said finally. "And scared, but lighter." He nodded. "That's normal. Choosing her own future." Months passed. Her belly began to round, undeniable now. She enrolled in online courses and started therapy twice a week. She learned words she'd never had before: boundaries, hypervigilance, autonomy, consent. She learned how trauma rewires survival and how it can be rewired back. Adrian changed too: more careful, more open, less controlling. He asked instead of deciding, waited instead of assuming. Some days they were awkward, some days warm, some days distant, but always honest. One evening they sat on the balcony watching the city lights glow. "Can I ask you something?" Deon said. "Of course. Why did you really help me that first night?" He thought for a long time. "Because I saw someone who reminded me of who I used to be," he said quietly. "Someone surviving instead of living." She studied his face. "And now?" "Now I see someone learning to choose herself." She smiled faintly. The birth of something new. The labor was long and exhausting. Adrian was there, steady, respectful, supportive, but never overbearing. He followed her lead, held her hand when she asked, stepped back when she needed space. When the baby cried for the first time, Deon sobbed openly. A tiny warm life placed on her chest. Her daughter. Perfect. Loud. Real. "This is yours," the nurse said gently. And for once that word didn't scare her. Later, when the room was quiet and the baby slept, Adrian stood nearby, uncertain. "She's beautiful," he said softly. Deon looked at him, really looked. "You can be part of her life," she said, "if you want to be. But it has to be healthy, equal, honest." His eyes shone. "I want that," he said. "Only that." She nodded. "Then we'll figure it out." 2 years later, Deon stood in a small sunlit kitchen, coffee in hand, watching her daughter toddle across the floor, determined and fearless. She smiled. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She had finished her first degree, started working part-time in a field she loved. Therapy had become a grounding anchor. Her mother lived in assisted housing now, safe and supported. Marcus was gone from her life completely, a closed chapter. Adrian was still there too, but differently. Not as a savior, not as a shield, as a partner. They shared responsibility, shared decisions, shared love slowly built, carefully maintained. One evening, as they cleaned up toys together, he glanced at her and said, "You know, you're stronger than you realize." Deon smiled softly. "I had to learn that the hard way." Their daughter laughed from the other room. Deon looked toward the sound and felt something warm settle in her chest. Not fear, not dependence, not survival, but stability, choice, and a future she had claimed for herself.